your flesh and blood.
And welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. Boy, it is always fun to come your way and bring you these conversations that I happen to have with my various guests. I like to call them friends, even if I've never met them before. But today, we're going to jump right in. We'll give you the particulars a little bit later. Today, we're going to be talking with a woman who has a lot of different modalities to help you move forward in your life. She's got a book out that we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about a lot of this stuff with Reverend SueFrederick. She's a channel, clairvoyant, clairaudient. Wait a minute. Let me see. Claircognizant, oh my Lord. As well, I will get that from her. Clairaudient, I was right. Cognizant, there we go. Claircognizant. She received her wisdom from guides and departed loved ones who to help you and I heal grief and find your purpose. With her powerful intuition, she uses sacred numerology, mystical information, to facilitate access into a divine lens to heal your life and mine. And welcome to our program, Reverend SueFrederick. It's really a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. It's a real honor to be talking to you today.
I'll tell you, I can't get enough of all of this. I've always been curious about these things. Haven't always sought it out. You know, it's not something that I've necessarily pursued in that regard, but I have been curious, and that's really kind of the bottom line for me. You also have a, pardon me, getting all choked up here. You also have a book out, Through a Divine Lens, and we're going to talk about that as well. And we're going to find out about some of the other things that you have written. And you've written quite a few books. I'm still working on my first, but it's really great to have you with us. Basically, the book we're talking about, Through a Divine Lens, practices to quiet your ego and align with your soul. And that is probably some great guidance, if you will, because sometimes our egos can really get away with themselves. They just kind of go off and almost like do their own thing, don't they?
Well, our culture supports that. You know, we are supposed to be in this world competitive, and the more money you get, the more successful and the more honored you are. And that's all the ego story. And yet we're each divine beings who came here and dropped intentionally into this physical world for a brief journey of evolution and helping others evolve. And then we get down here and we forget our sacred nature and our sacred purpose, and we act like crazy little greedy people, and we're better than that, and we're all divine beings. So that's why I write my books and do what I do to help everyone shift, make that different perspective to reclaim their higher self and make choices from that place.
Well, that's one of the things that we work on here in terms of supporting people and raising their consciousness, and coming from that, as you say, higher place. One of the things that just kind of struck me that I wanted to ask you about is the fact that I had a guest on, and I've had him on a number of times. People know who he is, Dr. Andrew Schmuckler. Andrew Schmuckley. And he basically, his perspective, his slogan, if you will, is a better human story, if you will. And he comes, I don't know if he's Jewish or not, but what I do know is from the Jewish tradition, for example, from the Torah, the Old Testament, as I have spoken with many rabbis, there is no external evil entity like the devil, Satan, and so forth. That the way it's described in the Torah, it is the lowest base nature of man. In other words, it dwells within us. It's just as the old, and I'm tying a lot of metaphors together here. It's like the old Native American story of the black wolf and the white wolf, and they're battling, and the young boy is asking the chief, the medicine man, who is going to win this battle, and the chief says basically whoever you choose to feed.
Well, I started this journey of trying to figure that out when my beautiful young husband died when I was 29. He died of colon cancer. And so at the age of 29, I went on a journey of studying every religion. I lived in a Hindu ashram for a while. I studied Buddhism. I grew up Catholic. I studied theosophy, Native American spirituality, and eventually spent 4 years in ministry school to become a unity minister, because in all those traditions, when you study all of them and you look at their foundations and the original Aramaic versions of the Bible, what you do see is that it's been rewritten so many times by humans, specifically by men in power, especially in the Catholic Church. And so much was written out of it and then reworded. And the most important part that was written out was that in the Bible, Jesus, his main commandment, he says, I give you a new commandment, and it's more important than any of the others. It is to love one another. And then from there on, he dies, and a religion is created that says you can only be saved through Jesus, and without that, you go to hell. And that dogma has damaged so many souls on earth because it isn't true. And in unity, the reason I became a unity minister, I think they get it perfectly right when they say God is a loving consciousness, a force of divine love that created this universe, that runs through each piece of it and each person in it, each soul. And God is in all of us. And the only negative devil means, in the metaphysical interpretation of it, thoughts that separate us from our God consciousness. That's the definition of devil in unity.
And what I find so interesting, and I'm seeing more and more of these conversations, and they're short little things on YouTube. I love the little shorts because it keeps your attention span just long enough to see the whole thing, and then you get to move on to something else funny. And I love comedy. I listen to and watch especially Jeff Dunham and his ventriloquist act. Jim Gaffigan and his conversations about his family and his kids. But one of the things that really struck me about what you are talking about, well, first of all, when I worked for 15 years for a Christian radio station, I had a real hard time with the story of the end of the world. Okay. And I really felt like something's not right here. Something is amiss. And I'm bored with the story. Is there anything I can do to help to hasten the end of the world, Armageddon, the Antichrist coming upon the earth, and so forth? Is there anything I can do to make that happen faster so we can move on to another story? Because I'm bored with this.
I know, I totally agree. And, it's true. The fundamentalist Christianity dogma has gained a lot of momentum in the last couple of decades. And if you even look into that and why and how that has happened, it has to do with money, of course, and greed,
yeah.
From the mega churches. Right. But they agreed back in the Council of Nicaea, and I wish I could remember the date of that. I used to remember it, but I can't remember it at the moment, which was several hundred years after Jesus died.
What comes to mind is 375 AD, I think.
There you go. Thank you.
Yeah. I think. I don't quote me, folks.
The popes, the bishops, they all got together and said, reincarnation had been in the original Aramaic text, and Jesus talked about reincarnation. And the Christian leaders said, if we teach this, what is going to motivate people to come to church, to believe in what we're saying, if they think they can just come back again, and there's no punishing hell? And right there on the spot, they created the dogma of hell. They wrote the Nicene Creed that I had to recite every day as a young Catholic girl growing up in Catholic
I believe.
school. Yes. Yep. And so, millions and billions of people have grown up with this terrible, unjustified fear of going to hell for the slightest. I mean, I grew up Catholic, where if you in your adolescence had a thought of sexuality, you were going straight to hell. Like, what a thing to lay on kids, right? And the Catholics even believe that you are born as a sinner, born into original sin. I mean, the psychology of all that is so fascinating, to think that they would want people to be born feeling guilty so that they had to go and submit themselves to the power of the Christian leader in order to be saved. Now that we've evolved as a culture, we know better. And I can say that I personally know better just from my own experiences. And I've had 3 shared death experiences, holding my loved ones in my arms as they crossed, and them taking me with them on the journey to the divine. And it's all pure love and joy, unconditional love.
Well, one of the interesting things for me is that as I worked there at that station, it took me about 5 years to get rid of the quote unquote belief in the devil, heaven, and hell, because, and I'll tell you how I did it. I began to look at it from a legalistic standpoint, and in terms of our jurisprudence here in America, in North America, in the United States. And I got to be more precise, because Canada is in North America. But anyway, and basically what it came down to was this: if in fact this story is true about heaven and hell, it makes God out to be an extortionist.
I agree.
He's an extortionist. Now, there was something else that I saw in one of these shorts that I thought was so fascinating, and I had to chuckle, because this individual was he was a journalist, a reporter. He was going around talking with people who claimed to be born again, Bible-believing, evangelical, fundamentalist Christians, and so on and so forth. And he asked if God was pro-life. Oh, yes, God is pro-life. Yes, God is pro-life. Of course he is. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, what about all that killing in the Old Testament? I mean, look at all the people that God killed. I mean, God wiped out the entire population of the planet, according to the Bible, except for Noah and his family and all the animals. Is that pro-life? And there was silence that came from the individual.
Yeah.
And again, this is not to get on a rant about, pro-choice, pro-life. That isn't the point. And it's not to get in a rant. These are my observations. And I always make this very clear as we move forward in this program, that these are my observations. I'm not putting this on anybody. I'm saying this is what I'm looking at, and this is what I am theorizing based upon the mind that was given to me by the Creator, whoever he, she, it might be. Not even going to get involved in the pronoun issue. I just find it so fascinating that we have lost our ability as human beings, not Americans or anything of this nature, but as human beings, to think rationally and logically, even though I had an interview with a gentleman not long ago who he and I theorized where he was coming from. It was a great interview, a wonderful interview. I'll have to pull up the name while we're talking here if I can. Anyway, basically, I was able to distill out of everything that he was saying that what he was saying was that there is, I don't care what you say, there is no absolute truth. And the reason I know this is because, according to our conversation, whatever my perspective is, my beliefs, etc., They are only mine. They can't be anybody else's. And I think the way that I phrased it to him as a child, I was 7 or 8 years old. And I had this dream or this vision. And if you remember the movie, The Men in Black,
Yeah.
the room where they had this giant alien laid out on his table and the head opened up. And what was inside the head? This tiny little creature.
I know.
And that's how I thought I was, that I was this tiny little creature looking out the eyes, listening through the ears, speaking and breathing and all this. But it was just this tiny little thing that was inside manipulating this machine.
Right.
And that the rest of the world was here for me. But I also had to conclude that everybody else was in the same state. And the rest of the world was also there for them, including me. So that my perspectives, what I was thinking, feeling, believing, et cetera, they were true, but they were only true for me.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting is, and I want you to dive in on this one as we move forward, Reverend SueFrederick, here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I want you to help us out here, Reverend SueFrederick. By the way, SueFrederick.com is her website, and we'll talk more about the work she's doing. She's also got some information she's going to share based on information I gave her earlier. But talk to us a little bit about this concept, and that it is right now the egos of the people in the world who are running amok with their egos and not looking at the reality that, yes, what your perception it is true for you and you alone.
So this reminds me so much of what I've experienced in my travels outside of the body by going with my departed loved ones, where the first thing that happens to us when we cross over is we get our own individual soul review. So I've had it where I've seen my life from this very objective point of view, not from SueFrederick lens or my ego lens, but from the way the soul views it all. And what you're saying is correct. The soul looks at it and goes, oh, look at that place there where you hurt all those people with your words because you thought you were so right. Oh, look at that place right there where you actually loved all those people because you dropped your ideas, got out of your head and opened your heart. Oh, look at that. Now look at this, where your work spread around and helped people feel more empowered and loving. And then it just takes you through every moment of your life. And you suddenly go, wow, those moments when I was stuck in my head and my beliefs and my opinions, I was not acting from my soul. My soul always felt love and compassion for all other souls, knowing we were all in it together, trying to evolve.
Yeah, it's not frustrating. It's saddening.
It is sad, yeah.
Because I mean, I've been in some great debates with both, especially when those 15 years, to where I was actually told, number one, by the ministers who were there with their laity answering the phones on these prayer programs, we don't want you to be talking to our people, because that's not what they're here to do, is debate anything. They're here to answer phone calls for the questions and so forth. So you just leave them alone. And I said, okay, fine. And then on top of everything else, they came to me around Thanksgiving one year and said, I don't believe you're saved. I don't think you're ready to meet God. You need to get saved. And I thought about that. I pondered that for a couple of days, and I came back to the guy and I said, okay, let's try this on for size. I'm standing, you and I are standing on the edge of a large body of water. Could be the ocean, whatever. And you have every means at your disposal right there on the shoreline to save me from drowning. Now, bear in mind, I'm standing right next to you. Are you going to save me from drowning? He says, well, of course not. You're not drowning. It's okay. Now I'm in the water and I'm flailing away, but I'm saying, do not save me. I want to die. I want to drown. Would you save me? He said, well, of course I would. I said, so you'd violate my own personal God-given right to choose. You would violate that as well. I don't look at it that way, but yes. All right. So what I want you to do is I want you to go out there. I want you to start your engine of your car. And without turning it off, I want you to start it again. Then I want you to go home and I want you to have your wife cook the Thanksgiving turkey. And then I want you to cook it again. You will ruin your car and you will burn the turkey. I do not need to be saved. I am fine. Well, of course, my logic was flawed. But I just find it, and of course, like I said, I got into these debates, but I've gotten to the point these days where, especially with this one interview in regards to perspective and individualism, I've also noticed a couple of other things. I don't see anywhere. Now, this is assuming you accept the philosophy of Christianity in general. You could label it Protestant, Catholic, etc., but otherwise, there is nowhere that I read anywhere in the Bible where anybody has individual rights, i.e. the First Amendment to our Constitution. Nowhere. As a matter of fact, if you read it correctly, in my opinion, and correctly is a subjective term, God is a slave owner, and that's what he wants to be. According to the Bible, we are slaves, because what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to serve the Creator. Now, some will say, well, that's a choice. I said, no, it's not. Not if God's an extortionist, it's not.
Well, Richard, this is why I believe in and have practiced meditation, the Hindu approach to meditation, for decades, 40-something years, because it quiets the mind. We will never get our answers through the mind, through arguing, through having all these conversations with people. We'll have fun doing that. We'll enjoy it. But we have to go to the quiet place within where we listen, where we download guidance. And if it comes in with love, loving energy, compassion, and this higher vibration, it's coming from our God consciousness, the part of us and of the universe that runs this world, this universe with love. And I want to share this vision here behind me.
Please, I love that.
Yeah. So
I feel like you're floating around in space there.
Yeah, well, there's a purpose for this. So I've had many dream visions and out-of-body experiences in my life. I think when I die, they should tear my brain apart and study it, because it's not your normal left brain logic dominant brain, I think. It's always had complete access to these other worlds. And yet I've still been able to function. I was an executive editor of a big health magazine for decades, and of newspapers. And then I reinvented my career to do my true work, which is what I do now that we're talking about it. And yet through all of that, I would always sometimes look at the outer world of politics, of war, of shootings, and I would feel so depressed and discouraged about the evolution of consciousness here on Earth. And so one day I got really sick. I had been teaching a grief shifting workshop where I bring people into this higher connection with their departed, and they get to have conversations with them, and their loved ones on the other side never say, you better watch out or you're going to go to hell. They never say that. They say, it's all about love. Please quit being afraid. Please quit being sad and depressed. Love your life, love everyone around you, and know that we are with you. So I came home from that workshop very happy, but very exhausted, because I'd worked with some deeply grieving people for several days. And I got sick, and I got a really high fever. My fever, I get very high fevers. It was like 104.
Ooh.
Yeah. And I was taking medication to try to bring it down. But one night I had this clear out-of-body vision that the angels or the guides or whatever you want to call it took me out of my body, traveled out into the galaxy into outer space, showed me the Earth just the way it looks here, and showed it to me from a distance, and showed me all these pins of light shooting up from the Earth. And I said, what is that? And they said, the spark of love and awakening that every human being has in their heart. And they said the moment that each person wakes up to their purpose here of love, kindness, compassion, and lets go of the rest of it, they become this powerful beam of light. And the light is always winning. And they showed me how all the time new lights are sparking all over the world, no matter what world events are happening that look so terrible. And they were telling me so clearly, the light is always winning, no matter how it looks. And they even cautioned me, and they said these next few years on Earth are going to be hard, but you have to keep remembering this vision that the light and the love is always winning. And I came back into my body in the next few days as I was getting better. I was trying to tell everyone about this vision. I felt like I sounded like a crazy person. You know, I was like, they took me to outer space and they showed me the Earth, and we are all waking up and it all is getting better and the light is winning. And then that's what inspired this book that we were talking about today, Through a Divine Lens, because I wanted then to help people make that shift, to leave their body, to leave their lives and see life from this bigger perspective, get out of our heads. And there's many ways we do it, and quieting the mind through meditation, through listening prayer, not from recitation of words that don't mean anything, and by connecting with the love and the light that is the higher realms here. We all know in our hearts then what is true and what is right.
Reverend SueFrederick's my guest. SueFrederick.com is the website. Through a Divine Lens is the book. We're going to continue our conversation with her here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it is always a pleasure. You talked just a moment ago about this aspect of going within and listening to the divine, that still small voice, which is what we have been promoting since September of 2019. Started out by saying, we asked people to participate in the year of perfect vision, 2020. And then when we moved out of that into 21, we said the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, where we ask you, we implore you to spend some time going within to that quiet, still, calm, peaceful place and listening to that still small voice. Maybe it's instruction, maybe it's guidance, maybe it's inspiration, maybe it's insight. Maybe it's just there to say, hey, you're okay. You're perfect the way you are.
Right.
And I couldn't agree with you more. And granted, my ego gets a thrill out of the debates. There's no question.
Right. Well, let me explain why that is.
Oh, please do.
Your soul chose this path that's called the Cancer 3 path. And if you read any of my books, I talk about numerology in all of my books. Numerology was the way I healed myself after my husband died in my arms. It suddenly, when a friend showed up and gave me a numerology reading, it made sense, because then I suddenly understood, oh, I chose the path I'm on for learning. I had a soul agreement with my departed husband that he was going to leave early, and that grief would break me open so I would grow. And for his purposes, the illness served his soul's desire to burn up some negativity that he had felt stuck in. And it did. By the time he crossed over, he was pure love. And the path that your soul chose for this lifetime, beautiful Richard, is the Cancer 3. And 3 means that you love ideas. You're a creative thinker. I'm sure you're a great writer. You're definitely a great speaker. And it's all creative and ideas and so fun and so unique. But when it drives you crazy, you have to remember that your mission in that path is to then quiet all that creative thinking and get back in touch with your heart. And the good news is the Cancer energy of the sun sign is your tool, your ticket for feeling your feelings. And as you move through this lifetime, it's the balance between the three creative, crazy ideas and the heart sensitivity of the Cancer. And usually when we're young, if we're men in this culture, especially, we'll protect our hearts, shut down our feelings, especially in your case, you know, being smart was your survival ticket. But now in this moment of transformation that you're in, it's really time, you know, for you, as you know, to trust your heart more, to trust your soul's wisdom, at least as much as you trust your brilliant mind and your brilliant ideas. But we love you because you bring all of these wonderful debates to the world. But the minute it's too much, you just be quiet, feel your feelings, and tap into your higher self.
And I also have to add to that, that I'm aware of, and that is that it's less that I want to be right. A wonderful saying that was given to me when I was 21 years old. It is better to begin in doubt and end in certainty than to begin in certainty and end in doubt.
Yeah.
And it isn't so much that I want to be right. It's more that I want to show people
that there's another way.
I don't know if I want to say illogic or folly of the quote unquote logic that they are following, or lack of logic that they are following, even though I have to go back to what I said earlier about the interview that I had about our beliefs, and that that's their perspective as it is my perspective in that context. But at the same time, it's like that discussion about, was God pro-life? Well, okay, well, let's take a look at the history that we know of God, going all the way back to Genesis. Let's take a look at that. Then there's the other issue of, when I go back to Genesis and I ask the question, okay, we started out with 1, and then we went to 2, and today we're over 8 billion. Now, where did it go from 2, and who created 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8? Because if you had the 2, they created 3 and 4, who were supposedly both male, Cain and Abel.
I know,
this is the whole illogic. This is the concept I'm getting to is stop and think about what you're thinking, about what you're processing, about how you're processing it, because it doesn't. 2 + 2 is 4. There is no other answer other than 4, unless there was a few years ago, Reverend SueFrederick. It was called whole math. Mm-hmm. And you and I would agree. I went through kindergarten, first grade at Catholic school, and then public school, but it was always 2 + 2 is 4. But whole math says, kids, we're going to discuss and decide what 2 + 2 is.
I know. Well, let's don't talk about that, because I had to raise these 2 kids in that whole math thing.
Oh my gosh.
We had so many arguments with their teachers.
Oh.
But let me just say that you're a born teacher. That's what your 3 path really is. You want to get the world to think better, to think differently, to examine all perspectives.
Yeah.
That is a very worthy path to be on, to be the teacher, to say, oh, you think it's this way? Well, how about considering this?
Yeah.
Because the more that people think, they're finally going to get to a place, like you're saying, where they go, you know what? I don't know. And I always say that the reason grief is such a great teacher, a spiritual teacher for us, is that it's the one thing on earth if our child dies young, because I work with so many grieving parents, they're suddenly, no matter what dogma they were raised in, they are in that moment of surrender going, I don't know what's true.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I am open now, on my knees, asking to just understand it from a deeper perspective.
And I've thought that the most honest place one can come from is codified, if you will, summarized in one word. on all subjects, I'm an agnostic. I don't know. One of my heroes, if you will, one of my mentors, Larry King, that's where he came from. He said, I'm not an atheist. I'm an agnostic. I don't know, and there were people that would call him trying to convince him, give him the evidence so he would know. And it's like, but none of us know. I don't even know what's going to happen in 10 minutes or 10 seconds from now.
Let me say, we don't know from our minds.
True.
But we know in our hearts and souls.
Yes.
We always know. We just have to bypass this mental thing. That's why I love the Buddhist and the Hindu traditions, because, Hinduism is the oldest religion on earth. And they figured out way back that the only enemy to our lives, to connecting to God 24/7, is the monkey mind.
Yes.
And they taught meditations that quieted the mind, and chanting. The whole purpose of Hindu chanting is to quiet the mind, because then naturally the heart becomes the leader, the dominant force, and the heart has access to your soul, to your highest knowingness. So in the Buddhist and the Hindu traditions, you spend hours. I did that in an ashram. At one point, I even did a whole week-long silent meditation retreat where we did nothing but sit, meditate silently. We couldn't speak to each other, and they had meals for us, but even in the dining hall, we couldn't speak. And then we'd go back to, sit in silent meditation. And there's no teacher telling you what to experience. You are simply doing mantra and sometimes chanting and going within, and you come out of that experience pure light, pure love. You've touched God when you have quieted your mind.
Yeah, but the downside, though, is now you get to go back into your regular world.
But here's the thing. If you can go back into your regular life with the ability now to go, oh, this thing is driving me crazy that I'm trying to get done, or my computer's acting up. Oh my gosh, I'm going crazy. Let's take a breath. And I even just kind of lift up and go, please lift me above this, divine guides. Show me a different perspective. And I feel the presence of loved ones and higher wisdom. And the minute I hear a higher wisdom perspective, I go, give me more of that. And I just keep asking to get more of that guidance. And whatever we ask for, we get. So,
yeah. Reverend SueFrederick's my guest. SueFrederick.com is the website. We will be linked to your website too, by the way, so that folks can find out more as they listen to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I love these conversations. By the way, the universe is asking the questions. I'm just along for the ride.
That's right.
And I love it. I have loved doing this. We are in our 15th year. We're fast approaching the end of that. So we'll celebrate 15 years of doing these programs. But I always look at it this way, June 26th of this year, I will be 63 years old. Now, that means that on the 27th, I begin my 64th year. And it makes sense, because when one is born, you're not celebrating you're celebrating your birthday, but it's 0, not 1. I'm here. Okay, great. 365 days later, guess what? I've been here a year. Now I start year 2 on the next day. So I've always looked at it that way. It was always kind of fascinating, as opposed to, how old are you? I'm 5 3/4 or 5 7/8, the kind of thing. You hear that from kids all the time.
I know.
It's fascinating stuff. I want to, a couple of things. I want to dive into your past a little bit. And I want to know, as I'm sure our listeners do, I mean, the title of this program is Tell Me Your Story, and I want you to do that. I want you to tell us when you began to realize that you had not only this cognitive ability, clairaudience, clairvoyance, and so forth, but how you started to go into the area of numerology. And sidebar to the numerology, is sacred geometry a part of this as well?
No, there are other experts
Okay.
that do
All right.
geometry. I stick with the numerology and the astrology in the way that I've created it to blend.
Okay.
Because I want people to come away with an overall understanding of what their soul purpose is here, why they're going through the challenges they're facing, how to move through them, where their reinvention points are. It's such fascinating stuff. I can't do it justice in our time together, but there are so many answers we get that lift us into the bigger picture. But to go back to your original question, I grew up in the 50s and in the South, but I'm grateful actually for my Catholic upbringing, because back in the 50s, the masses were still very sacred, very traditional. And I always felt the presence of some loving God back then when I was growing up. And so even though I didn't listen to everything the priest was lecturing about or anything like that, I felt as a child that God was a loving God. And I was always super weird kid, because I would literally come to the breakfast table in the morning and say, oh, I had this dream that, we were driving home and suddenly Gwen was driving Denise's car and we were going down Old Shell Road, and this green double-doored truck with a padlock, it stopped in front of us and we hit the back of it. And my parents would go, well, that's weird, but all right, eat your breakfast, Sue, and go to school, and then that dream would exactly happen. Like at the end of the school day, I'd completely forgotten about the dream, and we're supposed to be in our carpool going home, and it's Denise's car, and Denise has a headache and Gwen drives it, and we're headed down this road, and suddenly that truck is right in front of us, green with double doors and a padlock, and I'm yelling, it's my dream, don't hit the truck. And so my mother told me I better let that go, because she was French Creole and she had come from a long line of women with the gift, but they had not been treated well for that in the 40s and 30s. They had been, like back then, Richard, women were sent to asylums if they said that dreams had come true or that they had visions or they saw spirit. And so my mother was very cautious and said, you better just settle down and keep that stuff to yourself. But my father was an engineer, very logical. And he would take me to the library because he wanted to see, like you, are there any facts to support this? Is there any research? And he was so sincere, and he really wanted to understand why I had the experiences that I had. And he was so loving and so kind and really trying to help me figure out how to navigate it all. But then when I left home at 17 and went out in the world, I knew that I needed to figure out, I didn't want to be crazy. I didn't want to end up in the asylum. I knew I had to figure out how to get stronger into my logic mind. And so I kind of re-educated myself, and I even became a Montessori school teacher so I could help children learn in a very logical way. And I did that for many years, knowing that work was healing my brain. It was helping me to be more logical and grounded. And I teach all my clients that our greatest pain is our gift, because it's what we're meant to be offering to the world through our greatest work. So one of my struggles had been my left brain not being strong enough, logical enough. So I ended up teaching kids to trust that logic mind when they needed to, so that they could be successful. And that was one of my first careers. And then, and then I was finally kind of feeling, okay, I'm going to survive here. I can make a living. I can pay for my rent, And then I was teaching outward bound mountaineering, because I always believed that we should overcome our fears, and outward bound in the 70s was all about, jumping off the cliff into the water to overcome your fears. And I loved all that. So I ended up being one of those instructors, a little old 90-pound me, helping lead groups up over 14,000 foot peaks in Colorado, pure will and determination. And that's when my soul path kicked back in and said, no, okay, now you've learned how to survive on Earth, but that's not what you came to focus on. So this beautiful mountain climbing man, Paul Frederick, who I was so in love with and was such a kind, gentle, beautiful soul who truly loved me. We climbed mountains together. We loved each other so much, and he had some stomach problems, and pretty soon he was diagnosed and given 2 weeks to live. And he and I said, nope, that's not going to happen. And we fought it, went to every kind of, whether traditional, conventional, alternative, or woo-woo. We tried it all. And then he crossed over a year after his diagnosis, but he went through terrible suffering. And so I really was left with this sense of, even though Paul took me with him on a shared death experience and showed me in so many ways that everything was awesome in the divine realms and that this was the hard place, Earth, I still needed an answer to the question, well, then why are we here on Earth? Why do I have to stay here if this is the hard part? And the thing that brought me my first solid answer was numerology. And it said, Sue, you agreed to stay. You have this path of being one of the consciousness shifters on Earth. Get to work, girl. You have work to do. And that's when I began. I became a professional writer. I wrote about health and eventually, as you know, about spirituality, which is where I am now. But we each have a great soul mission. We each have an intention that our soul brought with us. And the more closely we can align our work with that, and our relationships and how we show up in the world, the better our life is and the more we can help others.
Well, you have written what appears to be, six books at least that we've got here.
Actually, if you go way back, it's 11 books.
Oh, my God.
Because I was writing about health, because after Paul and Chrissy, my best girlfriend, had died of cancer at very young ages, I just wanted to help everyone live a long, healthy life and prevent cancer. And so I was writing about nutrition and vitamins and organic foods way back in the early 80s, And so that was my first desire to help others from my own pain story. But as I did more, and I was celebrated for that work, and I wrote A Mother's Guide to Raising Healthy Children and all those kinds of books and magazines. And then I realized, you know what? We can eat all the healthy food, but it's really our soul's perspective that determines if our life is going to be healthy or not. And so then I really started switching into talking about the inner life. And yes, we got to eat healthy, but we have to have a whole different perspective on this life for it to not drive us insane, because it's tough here in the physical world.
Yeah. I want to comment on something you said earlier in the program about how, we've all chosen to be here and so forth. And that the quote unquote prediction, that's my word, not yours, is that it's going to get harder. And there would be those who are listening going, what do you mean harder? The last 3 years,
I know.
that wasn't hard enough, and it's going to get harder. But it's like Barbara Marx Hubbard shared with us, the late Barbara Marx Hubbard. Yes. She was on this program in 2007 and a number of times after. And she described the process that we were going through, even at that time, was akin to, I have no reference points to this, giving birth.
I know. I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is, and having given birth myself, I can tell you it's the worst pain you ever experience.
I believe the phrase when there's pain is, where's my epidural?
Yes. That's it. We used to joke because I was in the natural world back then when I was having children. And so everybody would say, well, write your birth plan and give it to the hospital and make sure that they're not going to give you drugs or something, So I wrote this very healthy birth plan. And then after labor for almost 20 hours, not getting anywhere, I was like, give me drugs, so many women have that experience.
Yeah. Well, my mother gave birth to 6,
Yeah.
So apparently the pain didn't deter her, at least until number 6.
I mean, that's amazing to me because I think we just have to forget. I
Yeah.
think after we give birth, we forget it, or no woman would ever do it again.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you that after number 6, I can't call her my baby sister. She does not like that. My youngest sister. After that, my mother went to my father and said, "That's it.
Yeah.
Go get a vasectomy."
Yes.
So that is something that my father and I share. Not the experience collectively, but he did it then and I did it some years later. But what I found so fascinating was that I have 4 sisters and 1 brother. My 4 sisters are still with the same man that they married. They're still with marriage number 1. I'm on 2, and my brother is on, I don't know, it looks like he's heading for number 3, marriage, not so much divorce, but marriage. And I'm going, okay, what the heck? What is it with the girls? They can hang in there and they can make it work. And me and my brother, for whatever reason, but I made the commitment when I met my present wife. I said, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make this work. I will not, if I go through that again, I'm never going to connect with another woman again. That's it. I'm done. Because
Yeah.
it just ain't fun. And I know that a lot of people feel that way with a lot of different things.
But relationships are soul agreements, Richard.
That's right. You got it.
It's
And
not like we're coming together to live happily ever after. We're
no,
coming
it doesn't work
together
that way.
to say, yeah, we have inner work to do, and we're
Yeah.
going to push each other to do that work. And if
Absolutely.
we both do it, then our love will get better and better.
Absolutely. Reverend SueFrederick is my guest, and her website is SueFrederick.com. The book is Through a Divine Lens, and I want to talk more about that, but we'll talk more about her as well as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. And we are Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it is a pleasure to have Reverend SueFrederick on the program. It's funny. About 2 years ago, I got an email from the Universal Life Church, I believe is what it's called, reminding me, saying, congratulations on your 10th year as a reverend. And I'm going, oh, yeah, I did do that. So
Yeah, I know.
I'm also a reverend, but I haven't really performed much of anything. But
I
I was
know.
born and raised Catholic too, and I have to tell you that I fell in love with, if you will, the church from this standpoint, that I loved the ritual and the ceremony. There's just something about
I agree.
Catholicism.
The Catholics got so much of it right.
Yeah. They did, yes.
They really did. And the right parts of it are the most beautiful rituals, the most beautiful ceremonies.
Yeah.
That we really feel that connection to a God. And, I think it's a little sad that even in the last couple of decades, the Catholics have gotten more dogmatic and more kind of fundamentalist in their approach, because the Catholic Church I grew up with in the 50s and 60s was very liberal, very open-minded. In my religion class for Catholic school, we studied Buddhism and Hinduism and all the world religions. Nowadays, they don't do that. It's like, nope, we're only going to teach you the Catholic dogma. And I think the more educated we are about the world and all the different perspectives on God, the less closed-minded and judgmental we can be in thinking we have the only right way.
Yeah.
Go live in China and study what they study. Go live in India and study what they study. Go live in any country that has a different religion and see the beautiful components that are part of that. And when you compare them all, there's one common thread that we all believe there is a presence beyond the physical world. And we call it God and all sorts of different stuff. But every path agrees with that one principle.
Yeah. And without going into any detail, I processed in my own mind the illogic. Again, 15 years at a Christian radio station. It was the best education I could have been paid for. And I was paid for it. But it was great because I learned about sociology, psychology, comparative religions, and the list goes on. I think that the one thing that bothered me most at the time was, especially in the late 80s into the early 90s, was this hatred that developed. First, for those who did not conform to the quote unquote dogma, i.e., the abortion, the women who had abortions, the gays, anybody who lived contrary to the teachings, the alleged teachings of the Bible. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. There's something you've missed in the Bible, in the New Testament.
Completely.
It was
Yes.
not, the church was not for the whole and the saved. It was for the hurting and the dying and the blind and the deaf, and the list goes on. It was for those who, I guess a better word, who were broken.
Yes, absolutely.
And not to convert them to anything, to
Yeah.
care for them, to love them. And that's what really, I think, really got to me.
You know, the Beatitudes say it so beautiful in the Bible, you know, and even them, they have been rewritten a bit. But when you go back and if you just do nothing else, go back to the New Testament and read the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes, because they're all about saying that we're here to care for each other and to care for those who are suffering and struggling and grieving and all of that. And when you look at where Christianity is now, what they've interpreted is that we're here to judge and condemn those who are different and suffering and this and that. And that's not at all what Jesus said. And that's not what any loving God consciousness has ever taught us or said. And when we get to the divine realms, we see so clearly the moments when we've been judgmental or hateful and the negative ripple effect that has had in the world. And our soul is appalled by that. So when we're down here, we have to live as if we remember what that soul review is like, and make choices from there.
And I'm sure you've seen the movie with Albert Brooks and Meryl Streep.
Defending Your Life.
Defending Your Life is one of my favorites.
Yes.
And the way she experiences that by going whole hog into everything, including I can eat anything and everything I want and won't gain a pound. Whereas Albert is over here shaking in his boots because he's afraid he's going to be judged. And somehow he just doesn't seem to get it until near the end. Great movie. Is it Defending My Life?
No, Defending Your Life with Albert Brooks and Meryl Streep. Oh. That is one of my family's favorite movies. When we all get together, we watch that over and over because it's so funny and so true.
Yeah. It's one of the things that went through my mind shortly after one of the televangelists who railed against homosexuality passed away. And I said, well, at least now he knows the truth.
I know. The thing is, we don't need to judge each other, because the moment someone crosses over, they suddenly see it. They understand who they were here. And, you know, I just definitely want to live my life in a way that when I get to the other side, I can go, at least I tried to do my best, you know, like I was not trying to hurt people when I was there.
Well, here's the other thing for me. Number one, I it's quoted over and over again, of course, John 3:16, for God so loved the world, et cetera, et cetera. And it's only recently that I've come to this conclusion. Again, here goes my intellect. For God so loved the world. Really? If he really loved the world, he wouldn't, and again, I'm not saying he did, he would not have set up an extortion racket.
Right.
Okay. But then there's the other side of it for me. Now, first of all, I don't know about you, but if today's my day to go, I'm ready. I surrender. And there's nothing I can do about it. It's kind of like being abducted by aliens. Do you really think there's something you can do about it? No. So I'm on the other side, if you will. I am now before the Almighty. And the Almighty says, so, Richard, what do you have to say for yourself? I said, well, I got two things. Number one, I did the very best that I could with the life that you gave me. And so if that isn't good enough, well, then you can cast me into the lake of fire. Number two, you are omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent. You have known from day one how all of this was going to unfold and end. Ergo, all of this is on you, not me.
But Richard,
Hey.
imagine that it works this way. You take your final breath. Your soul peacefully and painlessly lifts up above the body, above the physical world. And you're traveling through time and space, and suddenly you arrive in the most love-filled, unconditionally loving divine realms, and you see your departed loved ones, you see spirit guides, angels, all coming and saying, well done, let's have a conversation about how it went. And they're saying things like, do you remember you chose to have that grief challenge early on because you wanted to learn to open your heart? And look, you did pretty well. Look at that. And then that you're suddenly not talking to a God who did this to you. You are reviewing what your soul came to learn and how you did on that journey.
Yeah.
That's a whole different perspective.
Works for me. Reverend SueFrederick is my guest. Reverend SueFrederick, and SueFrederick.com is the website. That's SueFrederick.com. And you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. You're listening to Tell Me Your Story, and I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we are talking with Reverend SueFrederick, and I want to thank you so much. There's so much more that we could talk about. Was there anything else that you wanted to impart from me, from the information I gave you earlier in regards to numerology? Because what you've already shared with me is really fascinating and obviously accurate, because, I would agree with you in terms of the way my life is and has been going.
You're in a 3 personal year in numerology in 2023. So that's your personal vibration this year, which is the same as your lifelong soul mission of the number 3. So this is a very creative, productive year for you, very social. Get that book written. This is the year to do it. And next year, you've got some hard work coming. You'll be in a 4 year. You might be building a whole new platform, maybe TV, radio, or getting the book out. And each personal year gives you a different cycle of energy to work with. But just remember that this year, it's okay to be in your head, to be creative, to be in your ideas, but pour it into your book, pour it into the tools that you're going to offer to the world to help the world shift, because we're all in this consciousness shift together. We each have a different job. We're each a different piece of the puzzle, but we're all needed to step up.
Well, I thank you for that information. I take that to heart with the people that I surround myself with. I love what I do. It's really interesting. I've been doing this for, well, good. I checked just the other day, and I think it was 44 years. 44 years this August 29th, which is really when this whole thing began. Actually, it was earlier than that, because I had to go back to 8th grade. When I was 12 years old, I did my very first interview. But I love this. There's nothing else like this for me. I even interviewed my parents on this program, and my mother, she reluctantly gave me permission to air it. I say reluctantly, and here's the reason why. She says, do you really think people are going to learn anything from what your father and I have to offer? And I said, well, yeah, I did.
Yeah.
My father has since passed on. A matter of fact, March 1st of this year, 2023. My eldest sister, I think it was March 29th of 2022. And it's just
So
been
do you hear from them, Richard? Do you hear from them? Do they come to you in dreams or visions or?
not so much. I heard my sister's voice shortly after her passing when I got the phone call, just saying, "Hey, Richard, it's okay. Everything's okay. You're doing great. Everything's just fine." But with my father, I talk to him a lot.
Yeah.
And I get more along the lines of impressions.
Yeah.
And one of them I'll share with you very quickly. We were able to buy a Ford F-150 back in 2018, December 1st.
Mm-hmm.
And we had it up until April 21st of 2023, when via the mechanic and the insurance company, it was declared a total loss. Mm. Well, normally you might kind of wring your hands going, "Oh my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do?" And of course, first thing was I made sure my wife was okay, which she was. I took a look at the truck, which somehow got up on top of a stump, the front end. And I'm going, okay, first thing we got to do, we got to get it off the stump. Then we got to get it to a mechanic. Then I have to call the insurance company and so forth. But like another experience that I had back in 2006, there was no fear. There was more along the lines of thinking about how we got the truck. I was driving a Volvo. I went down a side street. I was hit broadside by a vehicle pulling out of the driveway. That vehicle was totaled. And the next thing I know, we're driving a truck, which is what we always wanted in the first place. So I began to imprint that experience on the present experience and going, something really good is going to happen here. Really. And it did. And now my wife and I are driving a 2020. Now, isn't this interesting? 2020, the decade of perfect vision, right. A 2020 Volkswagen Tiguan. Tiguan is German for tiger, which I thought, well, that's interesting. I like that. And it has all of the accoutrement that I have been wanting in a vehicle. It's just really nice. And they refer to it as a compact SUV, which I find interesting. To me, those are diametrically opposed terms, but but here we are.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, this is amazing.
Once we begin to realize that everything is kind of on purpose, that it's leading us to the next, and that we got to quit fighting and resisting and accept it. You know, my husband was diagnosed with cancer, my current husband, in 2018. And we ended up finding the only doctor who could really help him here in Phoenix, Arizona, at Mayo Clinic.
My hometown.
Oh, well, that's where I am. And so we had to uproot our life, our 40+ year family home in Boulder, Colorado, and move without knowing anybody to Phoenix. And since we've gotten here in 2019, I have made the best friends because I'm part of a group of women who connect. It's called helpingparentsheal.org, nonprofit for anyone who's lost a child. You should check it out. And I do talks and workshops with them, and I've made the best friends because we all believe that our departed are still available to us and can help us heal. And these are my people now. These are who I hang out with all the time. And my husband is doing awesome, and he's very much enmeshed in these new friends. And we have a great life, right on the edge of feeling like it was all going to fall apart, but following our intuition where we were guided. And yes, my husband will probably cross before I do, but I'm intending to take it with love and grace and positive intention, knowing that I will be taken care of, or whatever is meant to happen will happen. And that's our spiritual divine lens in action.
Mm-hmm. Well, congratulations. It's funny, with all of the friends that I have, my wife and I do not have a like-minded community here in Santa Barbara that we've connected with. That doesn't mean we haven't been looking. It just hasn't happened yet. By the same token, I'm always a firm believer that the universe is going to bring things around that when it's time, and it's just, it's just not time yet, and that's okay. But I still put it out there. The same situation with whether it's this situation with the vehicle, whether it's the situation in our relationship, whether it's the situation with the job that I do, or these podcast video casts that I produce and host. Again, it's all about, quite honestly, literally throwing up your hands and saying, I surrender. I surrender.
Right. That's it. I surrender to highest good.
That's right. I want to thank you again for joining us here on the program. I do have 3 final questions that I want to ask you before we wrap it up. But before I do, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We're here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m. for our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. We stream live at those times at richarddugan.com. Our podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations. And we have a video cast on YouTube. We have channels both on SoundCloud as well as YouTube. We hope that you'll subscribe, but at least click the notification so that every time a new interview is posted, I call them conversations, that you know that, there's another one there. Let's take a listen. Let's take a listen and see what they have to say. So, what else have we got? Oh, if you'd like to support the work that we are doing here on the program, we'd love your financial support. We have a PayPal account. It's there for your security as well as ours. And when you go there, you can basically type in my email address to whom to send the support, richard@richarddugan.com. That's richard@richarddugan.com. And as mentioned earlier, please take time during the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to spend time in that quiet, calm, still, peaceful place and listening to that still, small voice for whatever it has to offer. And with all of that said, we now jump into our final 3 questions, the first of which is, who is SueFrederick?
A soul on a journey like everybody else here, doing my best to see what's true and how to love and live with an open heart.
What is your life's purpose?
To bring ideas to the world that help shift consciousness.
And finally, what was your best day?
I've had so many. But I think what I have to say is the day I gave birth to my beautiful daughter, Sarah. I was 43, thought I could never have a child, and suddenly the gift of life. Greatest day ever.
Wonderful. Well, Reverend, I thank you again for joining us here on the program. I look forward to having you back again to talk about some of the other work that you are doing, not just around numerology, but some of the other things that you're doing to help serve and help people to get through, to find their life's purpose, to get unstuck and so forth. So again, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.
And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast. Folks, this gets a little longer every time. Love to Lal. Jeanette, I am listening. And Dad, be happy.